I am your host of Across Generations, Tiffany D. Cross, and this is the only place where you will hear three different perspectives from three distinct generations of Black women, and I'm so thrilled to invite you to this conversation. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Across Generations, and today we're having a really important conversation, and that's about mental health. I want to start by talking about my own mental health. I've talked about on the podcast before that it's been quite a year for me. For those who are new listeners, I used to host a top-rated show on a cable news network, and my show was abruptly canceled. And then it began a very public battle with this particular network. And I had to work my way through that while staying silent. It devastated my finances. I was betrayed by a friend or two. They began attacking me. It was just a lot of challenges. And so at the same time this was happening, I met somebody, thought I found love. That began to unravel. And then I began to unravel, but yet maintain myself as best as I could. And so I think this conversation is important because sometimes your mental health, when we hear that, people think, oh, you're suicidal or you've been diagnosed with some sort of disorder, mental disorder. And that's not always what it is. Sometimes it is just, hey, I'm having a challenging time in life and I've run out of coping skills. So maybe today I'm just going to watch TV all day, or maybe today I'm not going to go work out. I'm not going to walk those extra 3 miles. And that's okay. Those are sad moments that we have. And we need to embrace that and talk about it and give ourselves permission to feel that. So I'm really excited to bring in my guests who are part of this conversation, and that is Miss Les, who is joining us. Les Alfred is 34 years old. She's a podcaster and host of the Balanced Black Girl podcast. And, of course, LaTosha Brown. LaTosha is 53. She's a political strategist, an institution builder, and a visionary, and has on occasion been my personal therapist. So we have quite a bit to talk about. I want to start with you, LaTosha, because you've talked a lot about mental health. You and I have talked a lot about mental health, and I'm just curious your thoughts on collectively as Black women, how we maintain our mental health and how you've maintained your mental health.
You know, we often see mental health as it's a one-off. It's really interesting to me that from birth, we all know that we need a doctor. Mm-hmm. We need a physical doctor. We all know that we need a dentist. We all know, well, some of us know that we might need to get an optometrist. Right. But we think that we only should actually address mental health when there's a crisis. And so, but our mental being of who we are exists when we're born. And, you know, and I say that because I think, you know, I wonder if we actually approach mental health, you know, in the same vein that we approached kind of our physical health, that recognize that from the beginning, that was something to not only pay attention to, but something to nurture and to care for. How we would work through it. And so in my own family, you know, we didn't really talk about, I was from a traditional working class Black Southern family, that the only time mental health came up is when there was a crisis, when someone was going to really have what they called a breakdown. You know, oh, he had a mental breakdown, or, you know, and when we would see the signs earlier for ourselves, you know, even in my own family, I've been deeply touched because my only brother committed suicide at the age of 33 on Thanksgiving. And we had all seen at the house, we had all seen the signs of the mental health trauma he was going through. But in many ways, that's one of my biggest regrets is that I dismissed it. I was just like, he'll be all right. You know, he'll be okay. You know, and it was through that process that I actually, even a different space for me around mental health and healing. And so my own journey has been really starting to embrace that my mental well-being is always a space of who I am. And there are moments that I have coping mechanisms, and there are moments that really I need some help. I need some support. And so my goal has been, particularly as I've gotten older, one of the things that I think I've learned is instead of waiting until I get to the breaking point, that how can I put some things in place to actually help be a release to take the pressure off me. And for me, that has been doing the things that I love, like singing and writing and just kind of enjoying, like generating joy. But it's also been putting some pieces in place for me, like therapy, like really being able to actually have therapists, my friendships. And what has been a major, major key for me has been my faith. You know, my belief that there's a higher power, and this idea that everything that I'm going through is for my greater good. I cannot tell you how many mud puddles that has pulled me out of just kind of this notion of being able to tap into something greater than the moment in my circumstance.
Tap into something greater than the moment of your circumstance.
That's right.
That's so key. I have to tell you, Les, I'm in therapy. I go to therapy, and therapy has been helpful. But my therapist said something to me a few months ago that really caught me off guard. It shocked me. And she said, Tiffany, you're depressed. And I was so surprised. I was like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm out here kicking it. I'm going on walks. I'm about to go to Paris with my girls. I am living. And what she said to me really changed my perspective on it. She said, yes, but the energy it's taking for you to keep pushing and getting up every day where it used to be natural for you. And now you are forcing yourself. It takes a lot more energy for you to get up and face the world every day. And that really surprised me. And when she said that, I thought, yes, because I'm giving myself that pep talk every day. Like, you feel like laying in bed all day, but nope, get up, walk around the block, feel the sun on your face. Where before it used to be, good morning, world. I'm going to walk around the block and feel the sun on my face. And so I wonder if a lot of us are going, our symptoms are overlooked and our diagnosis is undertreated.
Definitely. I think you bring up a really good point that a lot of us think that depression or certain mental health things that we're going through look a certain way or feel a certain way. Or if you're like, well, I'm not in bed all day, so I can't be depressed. I'm still doing all the things. I'm still getting everything done. But it can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. And there's also been a lot of research that has shown that in Black women and Black girls, we tend to be underdiagnosed because we do show symptoms differently, particularly around anxiety. So it's something really important to be mindful of.
What do those symptoms look like?
I mean, for a lot of those things where it seems like we're being standoffish or being accused of having an attitude. I know so many times when I was younger, I was told I had an attitude, and really I'm like, oh, I was an anxious kid. And that's where the attitude came from. It was anxiety, but nobody knew.
Yeah, I think that's so key. And, look, I think as Black women, we do have to talk about this. You talk about your faith. You lean into your faith. I would say that some people feel like when I'm coming to you saying I'm depressed, don't tell me to pray it away. Like Jesus cannot diagnose me. I'm feeling heavy today. So for people who that might not be their therapy, is there a spiritual element that's not so rooted in standard religion, a lot of new age medicine practices that people are employing these days. Here's your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I when I talked about faith, I wasn't specifically saying a religious praying. My faith was shaped by religious beliefs, but when I said, when I refer to faith, whatever that is, right? What is the thing that makes you feel alive? Whatever that thing is. For some people it might be love. For some people it may be art. For some people it may be this belief in some greater power or energy. For some people it may be their religion. For some people they have the opposite. So I shared in terms of what I needed is I'm one of those people that I needed a lifesaver. That I needed to know that when the water is deep, somebody's going to throw a lifesaver out to me and I can at least grab hold to it. And so for me, the grabbing hold to it is believing that this circumstance is a part of my life journey, that I'm not being punished. Because I think that there's a distinction. I think we need to make a distinction in terms of at least how I hold religion, how I hold faith. That, that religion is this set of beliefs, that all these rules and these parameters and that kind of piece. When I say faith, I'm tapping into this belief of something greater that I feel like I always have access to, that I can tap into. And so for me, like this year, quite frankly, 2023 has been hell. This has been the hardest year of my life. You know, those that know me know that, as you know, I experienced the greatest loss I have ever experienced in my life. I buried almost a year ago, at the top of the year, 2 days before Christmas, I buried my only child, right? Completely unexpected, right? Who for my entire adulthood, I had him when I was 22 years old. My entire adulthood, I was with this child. My whole life was shaped by this young man, by my baby. And so for me, this was the year that literally, when I say those tools were tested, right? It was this year. And so there was a couple of things I think my greatest learning lesson came out of, even from the position, for me to persevere through the pain, was that I finally understood that the pain won't kill me. Because I thought it was going to take me out, right? And I think so much of and that if my normal process over the years has been, I'm a workaholic. So once I start feeling some discomfort or some pain or some anxiety, I just go direct that to work. I just come up with another project. I just work more. I focus. I'm not gonna focus on this thing that's causing me pain. I'm not gonna focus on this relationship that ain't working out. I'm not gonna focus on my family's falling apart. What I'm gonna do is just go put everything into my work. And for years, I thought that was redirecting. I actually thought that was a thing to do, because I thought that was taking the negative energy and directing it into some positive energy, right? What I realized is that I was running, that I wasn't dealing with that thing that I was running from in my 20s showed back up in my 30s, showed back up in my 40s, and showed back up on my doorstep in my 50s. And so, what is interesting, I think the pain of the loss of my child had me arrested. I was paralyzed. I couldn't do anything else. I was just paralyzed. And so it forced me to kind of sit and surrender to it. And I know that sounds counterintuitive around how you going to surrender to the pain, but I actually surrendered to the space and surrendered that as a human being, that part of the experience of life and love is that we're going to experience loss. That as a human being, that there is no appreciation of pleasure without understanding or tasting the bitterness of pain. And so that all of that, even my pain, has a purpose. And so over the years, or particularly this year in particular, I've recognized that pain is not indicative that I am having a mental breakdown or that my world is collapsing. It means that I'm at this point of my life journey and my experience is that this is what I'm going to experience. And then the goal is, what can I do to actually get the tools, the people, or the support system around me for me to make it through this moment, because this is a moment.
Something you said struck me. There's a beautiful phrase that I learned when I was too young to even appreciate it, but it's the soul would have no rainbow had the eyes no tears. So when you said we have to experience loss, pain to experience pleasure, that resonates. It baffles me that you are functional, and I think so many of us, though, because it's not just grief. Another quote I heard is, grief is love with nowhere to go.
Without question.
That is something that's like, our hearts can feel heavy. And I think in different generations, your generation, therapy is normal. Like people begin sentences, what my therapist says. I think with my generation, it is becoming normal. It's not normalized with everybody, but it's becoming normal. I think with your generation, it wasn't.
No.
Going through your 20s and 30s.
There was a stigma attached to it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that there was a stigma attached to, by the time you're saying you're going to the therapist, people are like, oh, she crazy, right? And so even those, it's interesting, because I remember there was a friend of mine who had been going to a therapist for years, a really, really good friend. And it was in the course of a conversation that she said it, and I saw her face. She was like, as if we were, not only that we would judge her, but that as if it was something negative.
Yeah.
And so what I do love about, and why I love this show around cross generations, what I am learning from young people and particularly for this new generation, listen, they are centering their mental health in a way that I've not seen previous generations center their mental health. Matter of fact, the generation above me, my mother, and my grandparents, the baby boomers, that baby boomer generation, they basically was like, get over it. They were the generation that was like, because we were trying. I think we were the 80s babies. We were like, oh, I don't feel good. So it was like, no, you got to get over yourself. You ain't working hard. Pain and struggle. Struggle is a blessing. And so, I'm learning a lot for this new generation, this young generation around how therapy but not just therapy, how mental health and healing should be a daily part of integrated in our lives as we're shaping our lives.
Yeah. I completely agree.
There's almost a stigma. It's almost the opposite now, where there's a stigma to have not been to therapy. Like if you're not in therapy, or you haven't kind of started to work on yourself or identify what's going on with you, there's stigma around that. It's almost the opposite.
Well, I mean, here's the thing that I think, have to recognize as, Black people, access to mental health care is not something, I mean, when you consider the wealth gap in this country, therapy is a luxury for a lot of people. Absolutely. So I think sometimes the question is like, yeah, look, I'm not, standing on a bridge about to jump. You're not going to find me hanging from my shower rod. But I'm having a hard time getting, through the days. What can a person like that do when that's what it is? Sometimes therapy is, I'm having a hard time in my relationship. Sometimes therapy is, I'm not over that thing that happened to me when I was 14 or 17 or whatever. Sometimes therapy is, if this bitch down the hall say one more thing to me, she gonna find out today. Like there are all kind of things that are tugging at our spirit, and trying to navigate and manage that on a sometimes daily basis, particularly the unique things we experience as Black women and the ancestral trauma we carry with us. I'm just curious from you, what would you say to younger women who may not have, achieved the earning income to be able to go to therapy, or just haven't managed the tools to manage this kind of life?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think when a lot of people think about taking care of their mental health or even say therapy, they literally think talk therapy. But talk therapy is like the tip of the iceberg. There's so many different therapeutic things that we can do to take care of ourselves and our mental health. And oftentimes, we just have a lot trapped in our bodies from our experiences of things that we just need to release. And if we're conscious of that, whether that's through movement, whether that's through exercise, whether that's through dancing, whether that's through journaling, but being honest with ourselves about what's there and being able to consciously release it, those things can be really therapeutic as well.
I am navigating my way around all of this, and I want to revisit something you said, LaTosha, because you and I have had this conversation before, and it's I think that's such a go-to for Black women. Like, I'm gonna throw it all at work. I'm going to come up with another project. I'm going to be Superwoman, and sometimes I'm going to become Superwoman because I think that will attract love to me and acceptance, and I won't feel so bad about myself or about this circumstance. Sometimes it's, I literally cannot manage this thought and I need a distraction. So let me focus on something. You said to me, I was literally weeping one night, and we were together, and you said, it's like you said it with all the love, but you said it's like you have a bowl of shit and you keep putting shit on top of it, like you putting perfume and flowers and all these pretty things on top of it, but that shit still stinks, like there's still something that you are not getting to. And for me, I've been trying to, okay, let me get these flowers out the way. Let me get to this shit that like Tasha sees and other people experience. My question that I always ask people, because they say, you got to do the work. You got to do the work. What specifically is the work? What does the work look like? Like when I wake up and it's like, if you say, okay, to do the work, you got to read these 3 books and take some notes. I'm on it. If you say the work is, you got to go run 8 miles. I'm on it. But the work on getting to that inner core of yourself to have a healthier, lighter space, what does that work look like?
It's interesting because while I believe in therapy, participate in therapy, I think it's a missed opportunity when we see that being able to afford a therapist is the only kind of form of healing we have. Africans we African. Right? At the end of the day, indigenous cultures have had we've created a whole, like a beautiful variety of tools that we're able to use. I think there are three things that come to mind when you ask that question. The first thing to me is we should ask ourselves the question, who is creating the trauma, right? And who is recreating the trauma? Because it's one thing to have the trauma. It's another thing if you're having issues. I'll give an example. If you're having issues, real deep issues around your image of yourself or who you are, right? And you go to your therapy session, you leave out your therapy session and you go back in the car and you're not mindful of what you're playing in your car, your music. You're not mindful of what you're looking at on TV. You're not mindful around the relationships. Like, therapy is not going to change it. You change it. All therapy does is to help you hopefully unpack, right? Unpack your thinking, unpack how you're approaching or seeing, give you another perspective to see it. But when you say do the work, you have to be committed to doing the work yourself. And so I think there's a number of things that, we have to think about. One, I think part of it is as an organizer, one of the things that we teach other organizers is first do no more harm, right? Communities that are already harmed, don't continue to add the harm.
Yeah.
What I see is really harmful is oftentimes we consistently recreate the harm and the trauma that happens to us. If it don't feel good to you, then that's your message. You don't need nothing deep. You don't need no therapist saying anything to you. It doesn't feel good. At least isolate that. Whatever that thing is. If you listen to music doesn't make you feel good, don't listen to that music. If you see TV and it's making you anxious, like, don't look at TV. I know those are really simple pieces, right?
But important.
But important. I think the second thing is, and I had to learn this. I had to learn that it's not either. Part of, I think, the problem in capitalism is that capitalism has told us that we're supposed to be happy all the time. Where they do that at? Like who does that?
Yeah.
I've never met a baby that didn't cry.
Right.
Right. I never met a child that was happy all the time. But we have actually internalized this belief that somehow if my job ain't going right or my marriage ain't right, I ain't having a good day, I ain't having a good hair day, then that means all is lost. Because I do think there's an extreme that is happening. That on one hand, while I think there's this notion of we have to deal with our mental health, there's this extreme that is also simultaneously
This
happening.
Expectation of a permanent nirvana.
Right, this permanent nirvana
Yes,
that is just not realistic,
Yeah.
nor even is it good for us, right? That I will say that part of the woman who I am, some of the parts of me that I'm most proud of actually came out of me addressing painful circumstances and situations. And so I think, like, if I were to say kind of these things to do, I think one, I'd like really reduce the way and think about how you're recreating the trauma in your life. Secondly, recognize that as a human being, I can hold pain and joy in the same body, right? At the same time. And so really this question of how are you generating joy for yourself? Like, not just running away from the pain, because I don't think you run away from the pain. I think literally for me, and I wouldn't have said this 10 years ago, right? But I am really learning the value of sitting in the pain, right?
That's so hard.
Oh,
That's
it's
such
so
a hard
hard.
thing to do.
It's so hard.
I have not managed that.
Oh, it is. It has been life-changing to me. It has been life-changing to me to be. No, I don't like it.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't feel good, but there's something about it. I remember one of the days that I forced myself to sit in a space, and I knew I was feeling these feelings of loss about my son, and I allowed myself just to cry and just to wail. And I remember emerging from that state, I literally felt lighter to the point where I told my friend, I was like, I like to cry.
It's a release.
Yeah.
You released it. You let it out.
It's a release. It's
Yeah.
And so there's something about us giving ourselves permission to be human, right? That this whole idea that we've got to be perfect all the time or our life had to be perfect. And I got a whole nother thing that I think social media has created.
I was going to get into that, especially with your generation. I cannot imagine growing up with Facebook back, which was, the first, and then Instagram, and then
MySpace
TikTok,
and
MySpace, all of that. It just wasn't a thing for me. And I even find being, middle-aged in my mid-40s, looking through Instagram sometimes makes me feel bad about myself, and I I think I have a pretty good life, but I will be scrolling and think, well, why wasn't I invited to that premiere? Or why didn't I do that carpet? Or, why didn't I get to go to this party? And I could literally be on the flight from Paris
That's
looking
right.
at it,
Yep.
and it creates this comparison culture.
For sure.
So I've been struggling with deleting Instagram from my phone.
Mm-hmm.
I also will, all of us will be at a beautiful dinner together doing something fabulous, and everybody's going like this.
Yep.
Looking at what everybody else is doing. We're
Mm-hmm.
missing each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, to me, Les, it treats human beings as avatars.
That's right.
You're not a real person.
That's right.
Like every experience, I'm doing this
Yeah.
for the gram
Right.
because I'm chasing likes and followers, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
chasing love, acceptance, because I'm feeling a void in myself that I haven't figured out a way to fill. And I think about young girls going through that right now.
For sure.
Going through puberty,
Yeah.
looking at Instagram,
So hard.
having acne,
Yeah.
having your hair look a certain way,
Yeah.
gaining weight, losing weight. I don't know how they manage.
I don't either. And I think that a lot of young, especially like the younger teenage girls today, don't have that kind of awkward stage that I feel like probably my generation as a millennial was kind of the last to have, where it was like we didn't really know how to do our makeup. We looked a little off. We were kind of figuring it out, trial and error.
Yeah.
Versus for them, they have every product, every tutorial, all of this pressure to look so much older and feel so much more together at a really young age.
These filters are destroying us.
It's
Yeah, they are.
wild.
Like destroying us.
But I
Yeah.
think the biggest thing that makes it hard is the
I
impact.
hope we have a filter on the camera right now. Anyway.
So we can, a little example. Probably the hardest thing that I think social media has done is its impact on our relationships and on our friendships.
I agree.
And I've been talking to my friends about this a lot because I think a lot of people struggle with making friends in adulthood, especially like your 20s and your 30s are such an awkward time because if you finish school, then everybody's just kind of off doing their own thing. Everybody's lives are kind of different all at once. But with social media, you have this pressure to do all of these grandiose things with your friends. We got to go to Paris. We got to have the big birthday dinner. We got to have the big trip and do all these things. And we're not like building foundational friendships and relationships that are really sacred for our mental health. We're not just going to each other's houses and just chatting. Everything has to be a production because we feel like we need to, create content for social media. And so
And we're
it's been-
building these little empires to ourselves. Everybody wants to be a celebrity. So
Right.
it's like, let me, create this. Look, I think a lot of this culture stems from, I did grow up with reality TV. The Real World was just coming out when I was growing up. I tuned in and then it just ran amok, And so now you have this culture of like filtered, contoured faces acting an ass on camera, all for attention.
That's right.
And it's just a bit exhausting. And so when you have people your age, my age, and your age perpetuating that behavior, and then you have 14-year-olds emulating that behavior, I do wonder collectively where our mental health is going. For the Balanced Black Girl podcast, what is your advice to the unbalanced Black girls?
I'm trying to figure out how to be a balanced Black girl too. So a lot of it is like me being a student. But I think especially for those of us in our 20s and in our 30s, we're in such an interesting position where we have so much choice and we have so many opportunities. When I think about my mom, my grandmas, my aunts, they didn't have. And on one hand, that's incredible. I've been able to do things in a shorter time frame than a lot of them were ever able to do. And on the other hand, it feels like this really big weight of responsibility to do everything and to break every cycle. Now that we're the ones who are aware of the traumas and the generational traumas and all the stuff happening in the family, we have this big burden to be the ones to break it. And so I think that's probably the biggest obstacle. I think that I know I feel with balance, and I think a lot of my peers are feeling with trying to maintain our balance and also do things for ourselves.
Yeah, it's a struggle.
We were all off balance.
We're all working on it.
Listen, and I'm from the generation, and we were all off balance. I think we were, we were the generation that our parents, we had just come out of. My mother and her peers had just come out of the Black Power movement, and so there was this idea of identity. But this is also the generation, the first generation who had gone to college, and they were out as baby boomers, and they still had kind of this kind of conservative piece. And so here we come, this hip hop generation, and I don't think we were even aware of the kind of damage that we were creating around image. Because I think we, quite frankly, I think we're the generation that actually has been the most materialist, right? Particularly in terms of starting, in terms of, we had to have the fly clothes and, we're creating this new culture and how you dress and all of those pieces. And so, and I believe that we actually traded something around kind of this real focus around materialism, and that in somehow material wealth was going to bring us some happiness or some joy, and you're stuck, you got that, and then you also got the backdrop of like mental illness. You got the backdrop of not being able to even talk about when there was mental health pieces. That if you don't feel good, go buy yourself a car. If you don't feel good, go sleep with 5 women. If you don't feel good, this kind of thing, that it was accumulation of stuff, or this concept of success that was going to bring us joy. I really think that we got stuck in this crossfires around that.
Something I think about that's different now. But I remember being young and crying because you don't know how to regulate your emotions as a child.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know yours, but what did our parents say? You keep crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about.
That's right.
Maybe you
Yeah.
said that to your son, I don't know. But I'm curious to hear from you, Tasha, because I do think like the trauma we experience, because you're raising your grandbaby, Sugar Bear, as everybody knows.
Sugar Bear.
Yeah, Sugar Bear. Is there a difference in how you raised your son versus how you raised your grandson when it comes to mental health?
It is, because there are a couple of things that I noticed that are different now. One, my being raised by people who are very stoic and disciplined, right? On some level, I inherited some of those habits of trying to control some of the emotions. You don't act a certain way in public. You do this a certain way in public, right? And they would say, "Oh, look at them bad, the white kids. They just run all over the place," and that we had to have a certain kind of right, right. But I think that there's some space around what I am learning. I think that there's some space to let children own their emotions and have some freedom around that. I didn't know that 30 years ago. Right now, I'm learning and seeing Sugar Bear. First of all, just the level of information that he is getting, he has access to. I'm noticing that, like, he tells me, Grandma, I'm angry. To really be able, or I'm sad, or I ask him, how I asked him the other day. I said, "How you feel?" I not feel good because he was upset because he had just got in trouble. If my son probably had said that 30 years ago, I would have said something similar to my parents and say, "Well, then you need to fix your face and come on, let's get out of it." I would not have owned it and acknowledged it because I didn't think anything was wrong with it at the time. And so during this process, it's interesting because in some ways I see my generation as this transitional generation. We're like in between this generation that says, "Oh no, mental health is never an excuse for anything. Get yourself together." And then we've got this young generation that's teaching us that. And I think that sometimes I feel an extreme on that way, that everything is mental health. I mean, I'm like, you just got to work. I need a mental health day. I mean, you've been here 5 minutes. Right. All right, I'm working with you.
I struggle with that. To like, when I have...
Work sucks. None of us want to do it. We all
but it is
have to do it.
I agree.
And none of us asked to do it, asked to be here. We're born into this capitalistic society that's breaking us all down. We're getting tired quick.
It is, but I do want to, I think that part of what, I think it is human nature for us to want to be productive. And so part of what I feel has happened, I think that there's a culture that is, I think either extreme is problematic. I think there's an extreme to think that work is going to solve everything. But I think it's a very dangerous position to think that work doesn't bring value to you, not just in terms on the money tip, but on the tip in terms of your development as a human being to feel productive. And what I'm finding that is latent under this culture, that this idea that all of us going to live like a video. Like all of us we just gonna get up, somebody gonna serve us, we're gonna be on an airplane, we're gonna catch it and go to the best restaurant and just live.
I don't think people want to live like a video, but I know at least for my generation, when I graduated college, I graduated right into the last recession. So take out all this debt, there's no jobs, the jobs pay no money. Our whole adulthood has been prices going up, wages staying very stagnant. So we don't even get to be productive in ways that are meaningful for us. We're doing all of this work that we don't care about just to live, and we're not seeing any fruits of that, even for those of us who are maybe a decade plus into our careers.
Yeah.
It's truly all survival.
Yeah. You touched on something because I will say I struggle with that from, a lot of my team in different places where I've worked, they've been closer to your age. And it has been because we were like so gung ho, like it was a badge of honor to work 18 hours a day because you were trying to achieve something. You were trying to achieve knowledge, status, position, that corner office, whatever it is. And so I struggled with somebody telling me about their work-life balance. I struggle with somebody telling me they need a mental health day. I struggle with people bringing up their personal issues, in meetings. And so I am trying to find that balance of I honor your generation for teaching us to be more mindful and thoughtful about that. And the competing side of that is, can you just do your fucking job? Like,
So when
I
you
really
said
don't
you
need to
struggle
hear
with it, what did that bring up for you? What did that make you feel like? Ooh, they don't
Honestly,
need that, or ooh, I want that, and I feel scared to say it. Like, what was it?
Maybe what I felt at the time is I have a ton of work to do, and I'm plowing through it because it has to get done. We all have real ass deadlines, and you're telling me because you need a mental health day or you have yoga at 3:00 and because your cat had surgery or whatever, all the things that happen, and it's like. I have been at my mother's bedside when she had cancer on my laptop. I have been.
And you shouldn't have had to be.
I should not have, but I guess my bigger point is y'all don't have any idea what's going on in my personal life for a reason because we are not here. This is not group therapy. This is the office. So can you get your shit together and meet your deadline? That's how I felt. I don't know if that's the right way to feel, but it's how I
don't think
felt.
There's a right or wrong way to feel. I think it's with things like this, the bigger issue is like, why are there systems at play that you would have to be on your laptop at your mother's bedside, not how other people approach work.
That's
that
fair.
is the issue.
Well, and I think a bigger part of the issue is when people speak out, particularly Black women, when we do speak out and say, hey, this happened to me and this is what I'm feeling, we're not always met with compassion by society. So, on this show, we always do a segment, The Streets Are Talking. And I want to get into some of the things that the streets are talking about with women who are dealing with real life things. What comes to mind is Keke Palmer. We love Keke Palmer, and we see what she's experiencing, this very public, very abusive relationship with her child's father. There was also, Bobby Brown and Whitney Houston, what we saw play out. Recently, Cassie and Diddy, I saw people start attacking Cassie and saying it was a cash grab, and so I just wonder what that does to our mental health as women when we say, this was my experience and it left me cut wide open. I was bruised. I was verbally abused. I was emotionally abused. I was sexually abused, whatever those things look like. I just wonder how we're processing this and what message that sends to younger folks. To all of us, really, but particularly younger folks.
Yeah. Probably a pretty tough one, especially if you see these examples of like these women who do have resources, power, access, getting attacked for speaking out. It probably makes the everyday person who has experienced abuse be like, dang. Yeah. And then who's going to support me if they're getting all this pushback?
Yeah. And then something like we use a lot of therapy words now. They've become like a normal part of the lexicon. Everybody a narcissist. Don't gaslight me. All those things. And it makes me wonder sometimes when we talk about gaslighting, because I've used that in conversation. I've started recognizing narcissistic behavior. But then when we get to things like emotional abuse, I wonder, what does emotional abuse look like? Like, how do we know that it's emotional abuse versus a disagreement? Or emotional abuse versus an argument where there are just two opposing points of view? And as we ask ourselves, what does emotional abuse look like? What I've had to ask myself is, not only have I received emotional abuse, but have I been emotionally abusive? So is there a way we define emotional abuse?
I mean, it's hard. It's like the first thing I think is like, can emotional abuse be seen or is it felt?
How do you, is it like, somebody asked,
it?
like, you can't define porn, but you know it when you see it? Like maybe emotional abuse
like
is, I can't define it, but I know it when I feel it.
And it also may depend on the person and on their experiences. And I think it's really subjective.
I think you're opening up a thought for me around what I say trends versus truth. I think, there's a pioneering spirit that particularly I see with my nieces who are younger, that I love. But everybody ain't got to be Columbus, because Columbus didn't discover America. America was already here. And I'm saying that because I think that there's a dismissal of what generations of human beings have taught us or have defined, that somehow there's this idea that because it's new, it's better, right? And so I think that there's something lost in this process. Even as you were talking about the therapy words, like, to me, that's very trendy. Like, people are using the therapist, I need a mental health day, all of those things, right? That's one thing, right? I'm always interested on how they assign the value to those pieces. Even this piece around work, I got the exploitation around capitalism, right? But somebody got to build our community. We need some hospitals, right? The question isn't about, the idea isn't that we stop building hospitals and schools and stop teaching and stop caring for our communities. The idea is, how do we create an environment? How do we create a system? How do we radically reimagine a new system so that we can do it in a way that we're still serving? There ain't nothing wrong with hard work. Folks, you ain't gonna outwork me. I'm real clear about my success. And I don't mean outwork me meaning that I have to be the one that stays 18 hours a day, because I don't do that anymore. Right. I take vacations, right? But damn it, when I work, I'm working. And so there's something about this extreme, this idea that you can't hold those two things. It's like the same piece around. You can't hold joy and pain at the same time. Yes, you can. That's the nuance of being a human being. Being a human being, there's something about us that I believe, like every other animal and creature, that actually I think that there's a part of us that's not fulfilled if we're not being productive, right? I really feel like in some ways I felt that being diminished, right? Dismissed, that in somehow that there's just this attachment to that of what others want us to produce, right? And not necessarily really understand that the production of something, the working of something, the working towards excellence is not just about, I work excellent, not because of what is going to provide for other people, but I want to do excellent work because I want my people to have what is excellent, right? And so there's a nuance piece that is like the elephant in the room that we're not talking about, that is really around how we're assigning, if we are going to radically reimagine kind of these spaces, then I think that we have to really be honest about kind of this basis of, there is a certain level of stress that is required to actually even make us move sometimes, right? Yeah. And that stress in itself does not mean it's a bad thing, right? Just like having a bad day does not mean that your life is over. And I swear, sisters, especially my young sisters, I promise you, y'all, he leave, I swear you're going to survive. You are going to survive, right? It is not over with, I promise you, right? Matter of fact, I promise you, 20 years from now, you'll be like, I don't even know what, I didn't even like that dude, right? And so, you know, and I used to hear like older sisters would say to me, baby, just keep on living. Because I really, really thought I had it, right? And there's some level that I took, but there is some experiences that I am learning, and I'm still learning. It's interesting because the older that I get, the more I realize I really don't know as much as I thought I did, right? And so when they would say, just keep on living, there's some things that you will only really get through the experience of life and actually allowing yourself to go through that process.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I know what you mean, like this idea that you're not supposed to feel sadness, or if you do feel sadness, the world has to stop. And, you know, we've survived so much as a people. It's not about not feeling that thing, but learning how to survive it, learning how to not move past it, but work through it, you know, and come out on the other side. And listen, I haven't mastered that skill. Maybe it's a lifelong process of trying to figure out how to master that. And when these things can converge, you know, when it's like I'm having professional struggles, my heart is broken, taking care of an ill parent, I have a needy child, you know, at my knee. I got some notice. My mortgage company sold something. I got to pay this now, you know, or oops, you owe extra $10,000 in taxes we didn't see. Like all the things of life that just happen to us all the time. Learning how to manage those things without losing it. I think that is the biggest challenge.
I do, and I think that's part of the reason why we need change makers. Because I do think, to Les's point, you know, the truth of the matter is this current culture we're in is just unsustainable. It is not sustainable. It is going to run us crazy.
Yeah.
Well, what's going to happen? Because I agree, it's not sustainable. What's going to happen? Where are we headed?
I think that's where we got to use our imagination. But my concern is, I hope that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Because I think we need to start thinking of ourselves, instead of citizens of this nation, we need to start thinking of ourselves founders of another nation, right? And if we're seeing of ourselves founders of a new nation, that's going to require some work, y'all. I'm just being honest. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe the young people can help me figure out how we're going to do that without working hard. I don't know.
Yeah.
I ain't figured that out, right?
You got some thoughts on
It's
that?
not that people don't want to work hard. It's
No,
that
but
people
we
don't
have
want to
to-
work for nothing. That kind of work
I
of
agree
building
with
a
that.
better tomorrow, great.
I agree with that, but I don't
16
even
hours
think,
in a cubicle making spreadsheets?
Yeah.
I don't
you
know
know?
if I agree. I think that my generation, that came right after this first around the corporate.
Yeah.
I think we were real clear. We were the go get paid generation. It wasn't the millennials now. It was the hip hop.
Yep,
Like,
there was no money by the time we came around.
Right.
It hasn't been
because it was
since.
gone.
It's been gone since.
We gonna get paid. But I do think, and we're gonna have to have an honest conversation around that. I do think, and for good reason, right? There is something that has gone on, or at least my opinion, or what my experience has been around that we don't even value. I'll just say, and maybe I'm judging this by my nieces and some in my family, I think they're brilliant, right? But there is this idea of, I'm just gonna have a soft life, right? Then maybe I just don't know what a soft life is. Because when my niece say a soft life, right, it has a particular kind of meaning around what that means. I want a fruitful, full life. And for me, that means that I'm gonna have a life that is balanced, that I'm gonna have a life that recognizing there are gonna be some hard times, there will be some soft moments landing, but there's this idea that I'm trying to struggle with, and maybe, sister, you can help me, that
Yeah.
I'm struggling with, that I believe that there's this value around just seeing ourselves as being productive, that there's some stigma that is now being attached to that as well.
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to the soft life, there's definitely this social media depiction of it that is very much like housewife, stay-at-home mom with no kids life, as a lot of people are making seem ideal. But I think at its core, the idea of a soft life is like a lot of us saw our moms, our grandmas, our aunties go through a lot of really hard stuff and get worn down to the ground. So I think in our younger generations, we just don't want to do the same thing. That doesn't mean that we just do nothing or are unproductive or don't work, but it means we learn no a little bit earlier and that we don't just run ourselves into the ground for the sake of everybody else. It means we ask for help. It means, hey, let's all do this together instead of everybody jumping on my back. I think is at the core of the soft life. But on social media, everybody likes to flash their stuff and make it look like more stuff we need to buy. But I think that's what it is at the core.
No, I agree that that's an element, but I think that's an element from a balanced perspective, right? and I'm saying that it's the same thing as we're talking about social media, that if social media is impacting us in all other ways, why would we not think that people would take that and run with it? The truth of the matter is, I do think that people are looking at, and I will say in my own family, I would say in my workers. I'm not the only, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a Black entrepreneur. One of the things that we're constantly complaining, if you got a business, I don't know a single business that is not really trying to figure out what are we going to do around, there's a talent crisis across the board, right? And so, I agree that there's, even when there's adjustments are being made around the work week or how many hours, X, Y, Z, and it gets to a point that some of the projects are like, y'all, you got to show up. Like, I don't know what else to say, but you got to show up. And so I think just as every other element, I think there's extremes. And I think that the social media is actually amplifying those extremes. And we're kind of dealing with that. And part of it, I don't think it was the millennials. Let me be clear. I don't think that it was the millennials that created this mess. I think we're the first spoiled generation. I think the level of, from that hip hop generation, this idea that we just gonna work, we just gonna chase them hoes, we gonna work and get us some gold chains and just live the good life. And this kind of seeking materialism, I really believe that we're part of the problem that kind of created this space of like, that's what the goal is, right? And even to the extent that we're going to work hard, I'm just working hard to get rich, not because I care about creating anything, not because I care about producing anything, which is why I'll be honest, if you look at my generation, if I go to my parents' generation, my generation had far more education. We had far more resources. I mean, we grew up in the 80s. We had a whole space while we weren't creating hospitals and schools just like our parents who or my grandparents who had far, far less than we had. In my opinion, it literally, we started moving more towards individualism and individual wealth. And I think it has taken a toll on our community around that. Much of our community, much of the infrastructure in our community came from Black folks simply working hard, but having a collective vision to work hard for the collective. And so there's something about the loss of that that I'm trying to reconcile, that I don't see I think that when I hear what I feel is an over amplification of this idea of soft life, it's the same thing I said. Where they do that at? Like where is if my goal is I'm gonna have a soft life, when my mother had cancer and I had to take care of her for 3 years, when my child died, when my job was shaky, right? Like, I have to know there's a time in the season. The time in the season is for me to have these moments, these moments that I can be as balanced as possible. But there's some moments in my life that I just had to step up.
Yeah.
And I got to show up for myself and for others. I'm not seeing that kind of balanced language, not only on social media, but quite frankly, I'm not seeing that kind of balanced language even with the younger family members. And so part of my perspective is probably shaped by those that are closer to me.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective.
I think as we talk about our own experiences, there are things that happen with Black women that when they do step up and say, this is the thing that happened to me, it's not always well received by society. Our abuse is dismissed. Our pain is, discarded, really. It's this false perception, as it is in the medical industry, in the mental health industry, like, you strong, you could take it. And so I want to talk about some specific things that happened in a segment that we like to do on this show, The Streets Are Talking. So, what are the streets saying about our pain? And I'll start with Cassie and Diddy. I heard a lot of people immediately start to say, oh, was that a cash grab? We skipped right past all the accusations of abuse. We skipped right past all of her accusations about physical abuse, emotional abuse.
Horrible.
We skipped right past that she was 19 trying to make it in an industry where this man was a mogul and significantly her senior. Your take on that? Why do we do that?
It's this phenomenon where it just feels like people want to discredit Black women when we say that things have happened to us. I mean, I think another example would be like with Meg Thee Stallion and that whole situation. People were constantly looking for reasons to discredit her from what she had to say about the shooting incident. And I don't understand it. It's really disheartening. And I think it's also disheartening when we see these women who do have a level of privilege and power and access be so quickly dismissed, or people try so hard to discredit them. For the everyday person who experiences abuse and experiences these things, probably feel discouraged and like, okay, well, if this woman who has this fame or these resources isn't believed, why would I be believed?
I have to say, I didn't really follow the Tiana Taylor divorce situation as closely. But my understanding is she was trying to protect their privacy, and her now ex-husband, soon to be ex-husband, exposed their private divorce proceedings.
Yeah, details of their divorce were made private, and I think in the details were just some of the details about their relationship and about some situations where it just seemed like what their relationship was really like wasn't what met the eye. And for a while, it seemed like she really tried to keep up appearances even when announcing their separation. And with that, people also tried to discredit what was in the divorce filing itself. And I just don't know if I understand this need to either, in situations like that, discredit somebody when they're sharing their lived experience, or in a situation when we think about, Keke Palmer, Cassie, Meg Thee Stallion, this need to defend abusers.
Yeah.
I just don't understand it, but it happens. We've seen it happen in all of those scenarios.
We saw on, Whitney and Bobby Brown, we treated two people clearly battling addiction. We treated it like entertainment. So I mean, we go from, to it's entertainment. We will tap dance on your misery because it makes us, laugh or gives us, fodder to talk about at brunch on Sunday. To, well, Cassie was out here trying to, get her paper. She was on a paper chase. I wonder, Tasha, if some of that is because we have been so abused in society. We asked young Black girls, maybe not now, but there was a time period where we asked young Black girls to hold pain they didn't even understand to hold. If the 10-year-old girl was sexually abused by a family friend or an uncle, we did not always turn in that uncle because we asked this Black girl to hold that pain, but we understood the white man's criminal justice system was so cruel that we couldn't imagine turning one of ours over to that. So we expect this little girl manage that pain, swallow it, hold on to it, because we know he was wrong. We got to protect him and we have to protect you. So I wonder if there's some sort of callous attitude of, well, my mother survived, or I did this, or this happened to somebody I know, and we, took it on the chin and kept moving. How dare you put our business out there in the New York Times? How dare you come out with this story and talk about this Black man who was this mogul? Could that be part of the reason why we do that?
I think there's a number of things. I think all that to what you said. But I think one, let's be honest. And I keep bringing it up, and I don't know why it's coming up. I keep bringing up this for us to really unpack capitalism. Part of why we perpetuate pain pays in this country. Right? There is an exploitation of pain on multiple levels. Yeah. Right? If I keep you in pain, then if I have something that's going to make you feel better, you're going to buy it from me. Right? And so there's kind of this culture that is constantly exploiting pain. And we see how the media creates, like you look at the news, 99% of the news is literally telling us about all things that are really painful and harmful and violent that's happening, right? Like there's this idea of, because we do respond, our mind, it gets attention, like we see something with pain, And so there's something around this exploitation of pain that I think has been a constant thread in this country. I think it's been a constant thread that Black pain doesn't matter that's been in this country. And I certainly believe that there has been a larger context that has been because of sexism, I believe, and patriarchy around women's pain is expected. Right? But I think part of why we're seeing this shift now is because I think there's a power differential. That part of what we're seeing right now is we're seeing, just like we see every time there's been Black progress, there's been white backlash. I think what we're seeing right now is I think we're seeing a gender backlash, that we're seeing a power backlash, that what we're seeing is we're seeing women now own their careers. Here it is, that regardless of what you believe about Megan and what she says, that at the end of the day, she's saying what only men could have said like 20 years ago. And she has the audacity to say it. I think that it's created, beyond the critique, it's created this notion that I think shakes the very foundation, I think, of patriarchy, like controlling this narrative around who controls the bedroom, or who controls the body, right? I think that there's a flip side of that I can put a critique, but I do believe that there's a backlash of these women that are owning their careers, they're owning their identity, they're owning their brand in such a way that I think that it has created not something new. Like at the end of the day, what war has ever existed on this planet that women were not considered the spoils of that war? Name one, including what's happening right now, where we're raped, where we're killed, where we're utilized in such a way. And so what I think is happening and what we're seeing now is I think we're seeing it because we're seeing the contrast of women that are actually being elevated in their careers in different kind of ways that we've not seen before. And we're seeing this platform that everybody is a pundit now. Everybody got an opinion, right?
Yeah.
I'm quite sure the streets been talking, right? But now we can hear the streets talking because we can go to IG.
The streets got an iPhone.
The streets got an
So now everybody got a
So
phone.
everybody got an opinion.
Yeah.
Everybody got a talk show on IG Live. So.
Yeah. It's not like across generations, though.
No.
It's much better.
Exactly. No, I think those are all really good perspectives on how we navigate our own pain and our mental health struggles. I think it's really important, though, to communicate to people tuning into this that if you are struggling, there is help out there. And we encourage anyone, no matter how big or small you think your pain is, to tap into resources, call suicide prevention hotlines. You can literally Google how to navigate some of the challenges. And there are resources available that do not come with a cost. So I just want to make that clear. And I hope if you are struggling, that you will pursue that. I will ask you ladies each, if there's somebody out there struggling with any kind of mental health. It doesn't have to be something so major, but just having trouble navigating life. I'll start with you, Les. What is your message to the unbalanced Black girls?
So I read a book last year called What Happened to You by Oprah, and I believe Dr. Bruce Perry is the doctor that she co-authored that book with. That was really, really helpful because it helped me reframe, if I'm going through something, instead of saying what's wrong with you, like what happened to you, to understand the root cause of why you're feeling the way you're feeling. So I actually think that book is a really great resource to be able to tap in and ask yourself that question. Because when I started learning, like, why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling, I then was able to see, okay, how can I navigate getting support and understanding what help I need? Because it's really hard to understand what you need if you don't know what's wrong.
Tasha.
I think what comes to mind to me is that I used to date this brother who had an engineering firm, and he talked about that he always hired athletes. He would hire athletes. Mostly he was looking for athletes. Yeah. And I thought he was saying that because he was being a jock. I was like, come on now, that's so crass. And he was like, no. The reason why I hire athletes because athletes know how to lose. And I was like, what you mean? He was like, what athletes, part of the training as an athlete is that you don't take a loss as the end of the day. You take the loss and you study the loss to actually become your trampoline to actually become a better athlete, right? And that there was some value that being an athlete, you accepted that you're going to win some games, you're going to lose some games. And so I say that to say, because I think the sisters that are listening out here, like I wish we could approach life instead of this, and I don't really like the win-loss frame necessarily, but to approach this space of, if there's this premise of everything that happens to me can actually be for my good, even those things that are actually hurtful and harmful, not that the thing itself was good, not that the thing itself wasn't hurtful and harmful, but how can you literally take that lesson, like that loss, like that pain, and actually it might open you up to actually be able to get help and support in ways that you weren't thinking before. I think the second thing is this whole individual, I got to fix it, I got to help myself. That part of the Black experience we've always had a collective approach to that. I remember going to my grandmother's church and they had a mourning bench, right? That people would collectively mourn and grieve together. There's healing in that process. So I would just say you're not alone. Find your tribe and love on your tribe. And the third and final thing, girl, generate you some joy. Wherever you get your joy from, that means that you go and you smoke some weed. That means you want to go and read a book.
Testimony.
Right? Like, do what you got to do to generate you some joy. Yeah. Like the goal is to make it through this moment because remember, we can do hard things.
And I just say, look, I indulge. But I do say, indulge responsibly. Generate your joy from internal places, because that's the thing that won't leave, and that's the hardest part. I mean, that's part of doing the work. I would just close by offering a quote from one of my favorite authors, Toni Morrison, who said, "Freeing yourself was one thing; claiming ownership of that freed self was another."
That's good.
That is. Marinate on that. That is a powerful quote because I know for me personally, this life took hold of me not just this past year, but as I discovered in trying to do work, this light took hold of me for years. And I am in the process of taking hold of this life. And I imagine a lot of you out there are too. And I choose to be open and transparent about all of my pain and my joy, hoping that it normalizes this conversation and invites other people to do the same. As Black women, we know what it means to love ourselves in a world that hates us. We've dug deep down in our humanity for a spiritual reclamation. So I would ask you all to ask yourself, what do you need to unshackle yourself from? Because when we are all joyful and happy, the world wins. And so the final quote I'll share from Toni Morrison is, if you surrender to the air, you could ride it. So may we all ride the air in a very light way. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Across Generations, and we look forward to welcoming you back next week.